All right, ever get that feeling? Like you're trying to wrap your head around something big, like what actually makes a great leader? And you just end up drowning in all these theories and buzzwords.
Oh, yeah.
You just want the good stuff.
Yeah.
You know, the stuff that actually makes sense you can use without needing like a whole PhD to understand it, right?
That's leadership for you.
Yeah.
As Hunt was saying, it's just not a straightforward thing.
Yeah.
You've got abilities and attitudes and the situation itself all playing a part.
Right.
There's just not one single answer that fits every single situation.
Okay, so let's try to cut through all that noise then. Because today we're going to look at this model that gives us a really cool way to think about positive leadership, especially when we're talking about education. It's called the WICS model, which stands for Wisdom, Intelligence, and Creativity, synthesized. It comes from Sternberg's work back in 2005. What we want to do today is really unpack WICS, see what it's all about, and look at how it compares to some of those other big ideas about leadership, the ones that are always floating around out there. And we're going to be using Sternberg's article as our guide.
Yep, like a roadmap.
Yeah.
So you're getting a kind of distilled version of a really influential perspective here.
Yeah.
And we're going to show you how Sternberg took a lot of the older ways of thinking about leadership, you know, what makes someone effective, and built on those, sometimes even disagreeing with them.
Cool. So I guess one place to start is, with all these different ideas about leadership out there, where did people even begin studying this stuff?
Yeah, well, a good starting point is often those early approaches, right? That's the first things people were looking at.
Okay.
And that takes us back to what's called the trait-based approach, which was really the dominant way of thinking, especially in the mid-20th century. The idea behind it was pretty simple. It was basically that great leaders, they just have these specific, identifiable traits. And researchers really wanted to find, like, what those magic ingredients were, believing that if we could just, you know, list them all out, then we could easily just pick out those future leaders. We'd know who they were.
It's almost like they were looking for a secret formula, like a checklist.
Right, exactly.
Like, oh, this person has all these qualities.
Yep.
They're guaranteed to be a great leader.
Guaranteed success, yeah.
So what were some of the things that were on those early lists?
Well, one of the first guys to do this was Stogdill. This was back in 1948.
Okay.
And he suggested things like intelligence, being scholarly, reliable, you know, dependable, being active in social situations, and even, kind of interestingly, coming from a higher socioeconomic background. So the thinking there was that, you know, if you're talking about a good principal, for example, they would be smart, they'd be reliable, and they'd be well-connected.
Interesting. So kind of like having the right social standing already.
Right, like having a certain level of influence already.
Wow.
Then you have Mann in 1959.
Okay.
And he kind of adds his own set of traits to this list.
Okay.
Including intelligence again, but also being well-adjusted, being extroverted, dominant, even masculine, and being sensitive to others.
Masculine.
Yeah, it was really a sign of the times.
Wow. Okay.
He even found that there was actually a negative relationship between being conservative and being a successful leader.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. So some of those things on that list, masculinity, socioeconomic background, it feels very much of a certain era, doesn't it? Like we were talking about before.
Yeah, definitely a product of its time.
Makes you wonder if maybe, you know, with that kind of thinking, some voices were missed.
Definitely. And, you know, that brings up a really practical side to this whole approach, especially in education. If you're looking for leaders who aren't going to shake things up, you know, rock the boat, you might, without meaning to, be picking people who fit a very specific and maybe even a bit outdated mold.
Right. Almost like you're just looking for more of the same.
Yeah, exactly. Like perpetuating a particular type.
So it sounds like it kind of boils down to this.
Yeah.
You find someone who checks all the boxes on your trait list, and there you go. You've got your leader. But it feels a little too simple, don't you think?
Yeah, it definitely has its limitations.
Like, I don't think the takeaway here is that those traits don't matter at all.
Right.
It's more that maybe they're like the starting point, not the whole story.
Yeah, they're a foundation.
Right.
But not the whole building.
Right, exactly.
You need to consider the context and how those traits actually get used in practice.
Yeah.
And those things are maybe even more important.
Okay. So that's where the trait-based approach starts to fall apart a little.
Yeah, that's where its limitations become really clear. As Sternberg points out, the link between those traits and actual success as a leader, it tends to be pretty weak. Like just having those traits doesn't automatically mean you're going to be great at leading.
Right.
And another big thing this approach kind of misses
Yeah.
is the whole idea that leaders can grow and learn. It almost says that you're just born with these qualities rather than developing them over time.
Right. Totally ignores how much experience and personal growth can affect someone's ability to lead.
Exactly.
So if it wasn't just about having certain traits, what was the next big idea people came up with?
Well, the next big shift took us to what are called behavioral theories. And these really started taking off in the mid-20th century. A lot of this research came out of places like the University of Michigan and Ohio State.
Okay.
And the focus here moved away from who a leader is, like their personality, and more toward what a leader actually does, their behaviors.
Okay, so less about like their inherent qualities.
Yeah.
And more about what you can actually see them doing.
Right. So
Yeah.
you can kind of sum it up this way. Leadership is something you do, not just something you are.
Right.
Okay.
And that really means that leadership is something that can be learned and developed,
Okay.
which is a really important idea,
Yeah.
especially for anyone who wants to become a better leader.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes a lot more sense when you think about being able to develop leadership skills.
Yeah, definitely.
So instead of just saying, oh, they're born leader,
Right.
it's like, well, they've learned and developed these skills.
Exactly. And theorists like Bales, they actually argued that the problem with trait theories was that they were looking at, what supposedly led to leadership behavior,
Okay.
not the behavior itself.
Right.
They thought that if we could just figure out, what those effective leadership behaviors were,
Yeah.
we could actually teach people how to be better leaders.
So what kind of behaviors did they zero in on?
Well, generally, they kind of came up with two main categories.
Okay.
First, you had behaviors that were all about the mission or the task at hand.
Okay.
Getting things done, making sure everyone was productive.
Okay. And then there were behaviors that were more focused on people,
Right.
like being sensitive to how the team members were feeling and what their needs were.
Okay.
And this led to some pretty influential models,
Okay.
like the initiating structure versus consideration idea,
Okay.
which basically looked at whether leaders were more about defining tasks, setting things up in a very structured way, or if they were more about building relationships and really thinking about their team's well-being.
Okay, so like whether they're more focused on the work itself or the people doing the work.
Exactly.
Right.
And we see similar ideas in other models, too,
Okay.
like Blake and Mouton's managerial grid or McGregor's theory X and theory Y. These all looked at how leaders balance those two things, getting results and also supporting their team.
So I guess the question is, were leaders seen as being either all about the work or all about being nice?
Well, it wasn't quite that black and white. But these theories definitely highlighted that leaders need to find a balance between both. You have to get things done, but you also have to support your people.
Right.
And what's really interesting is how these theories kind of challenge the idea of there being one universally good kind of leader.
Yeah.
It makes us think about how effectiveness might actually be about how well the leader's style matches the situation.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So what was the next big idea after that?
Well, then you have what's called the situational view.
Okay.
And this really shifted the focus to the context in which leadership is happening.
Okay.
The main idea here is that whether a leader is effective or not depends almost entirely on the specific situation they're in.
So it's all about being in the right place at the right time with the right skills for that particular moment.
That's the gist of it, yeah.
So even if someone was like a star quarterback, they might not be a good coach, even though both of those involve leadership.
Exactly. They're both leadership roles, but the demands of those situations are totally different.
Right.
Even Tolstoy, in War and Peace, he had a quote that kind of gets at this.
Really?
He said that basically the idea of great leaders is just a label we put on events that were going to happen anyway because of history.
Wow. Okay. So the situational view is saying that someone could be a super successful CEO, but maybe they'd fail completely as a school principal.
Exactly.
And the other way around, too.
Right, because the things those jobs demand are so different.
And we see that all the time, don't we?
Oh, yeah.
Like a superintendent who is amazing in one district, they get fired in another. And then the next person who comes in, suddenly they're thriving.
Exactly. And a lot of times, those successful replacements are the ones who figure out how to balance things.
Yeah.
They adapt to the way things are done in that school environment, but they also find ways to shape it a little bit, bring in their own vision
Right.
without making everyone mad. But Sternberg points out something interesting here. He says that while it's totally obvious that situations matter a lot,
Yeah.
there's not a whole lot of research that says that those situational variables are the only thing,
Okay.
or even the main thing that makes a leader effective.
So the situation's important, but it's not the only piece of the puzzle.
Right.
Okay. So just to recap for a second. We started with those trait theories, which focused on the leader's qualities.
Mm.
But the problem was those traits didn't always lead to good leadership.
Right.
So then came the behavioral theories, which looked at what leaders actually do,
Right.
but they didn't always account for the situation the leader is in.
Exactly.
What came after that?
Well, that brings us to what are called contingency theories,
Okay.
which really try to bridge that gap between the leader and the situation.
Okay.
So they're saying it's not just about the leader. It's not just about the situation. It's
Right.
about how well those two things fit together.
Okay. So kind of like finding the right key for the right lock.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Okay.
A good example of this is Vroom's theory,
Okay.
which basically gives a framework for how a leader should make decisions,
Yeah.
depending on what the situation is.
Yeah.
And a big part of that is how much knowledge the leader has
Okay.
and how much knowledge the team has.
Okay.
He came up with 5 general approaches,
Okay.
ranging from the leader just making all the decisions on their own
Oh, it.
to the whole group getting involved in the decision making.
Okay.
And the idea is that the leader chooses the best strategy based on, all the different factors in the situation.
Okay. So it's not as simple as just saying this type of situation needs this type of leader.
No, it's definitely more nuanced than that.
Okay.
Contingency theories are still pretty popular today because they take that complexity into account.
Right.
But Sternberg, he raises a really interesting question here.
Okay.
He asks if everything really is about that interaction between the leader and the situation. He thinks that some qualities, like having at least a decent level of intelligence
Okay.
and being open to new experiences, those are probably going to be important in most situations,
Oh,
no
yeah.
matter what the specific context is.
That makes sense.
He also says that a really intelligent leader, someone who's super smart, might actually be less effective if the way they like to work, really analyzing things in depth,
Mm-hmm.
if that doesn't work because of time pressure, or if there just aren't enough resources.
So even if someone is really intelligent, which we usually think of as a good thing,
Right.
it can actually work against them in some situations.
They could, yeah.
Okay. That's kind of counterintuitive.
It is, yeah.
So we've talked about traits, behaviors, situations, and how those interact. But what about the whole idea of inspiring people?
Yeah, that's a good
It
point.
seems like that's a big part of leadership, too.
It definitely is. And that brings us to what's known as transformational leadership, which has become a really popular theory. It really focuses on how leaders can inspire and motivate their followers to achieve amazing things.
We hear that phrase all the time, don't we? Transformational leaders. What does that actually mean?
Well, the way we usually understand it today, it has a few key parts.
Yeah.
One is something called idealized influence, where the leader is a really strong role model, someone people deeply respect.
Okay.
Then there's individualized consideration, where the leader pays attention to the needs of each person on their team and gives them support.
Okay.
Then there's intellectual stimulation, where the leader encourages creativity, thinking outside the box, and really thinking critically.
Okay.
And finally, there's inspirational motivation, where the leader really puts forth a clear, exciting vision of the future that everyone can buy into.
Okay.
So the main idea is that good leadership is more than just managing, checking things off a list.
Yeah.
It's about inspiring people to be their best and work towards a bigger goal.
So it's about getting everyone on board with that mission and really getting them emotionally invested in it.
Exactly. It's about shared passion and a sense of purpose.
Okay. But didn't Sternberg have some things to say about this approach, too?
He did, yeah. He pointed out some limitations, even with something that seems so positive.
Right.
He said that not every organization needs a huge shakeup all the time.
Right.
Sometimes what you need is stability and consistency.
Right.
And not every successful leader is necessarily transformational in this way.
Okay.
Like, they don't all have this, super inspiring visionary style.
Okay.
In fact, in organizations that are already doing really well,
Mm-hmm.
or in places where resources are really tight, trying to force big changes can actually backfire.
So even being a really inspiring transformational leader,
Mm-hmm.
It's not a one-size-fits-all solution.
It's not.
You can't just walk into every situation and say, okay, let's revolutionize everything.
Exactly. The context still matters, even when it seems like a leadership style should be good in any situation.
It's really interesting to see how many different angles there are to thinking about leadership. So far, we've covered a lot of ground. We started with those theories that focus on the leader's traits.
Mm-hmm.
Then we talked about their behaviors, the situation they're in, how those two things interact, and their ability to inspire others.
Yeah, we've covered a lot.
What's next on our tour of leadership theories?
Well, next up is Howard Gardner's leading minds approach.
Okay.
This one's a little different. It comes from a cognitive perspective.
Okay.
It's based on his famous theory of multiple intelligences.
Multiple intelligences applied to leadership.
That's the idea.
That's really interesting. Tell me more.
Okay, so you remember how Gardner's theory says that intelligence isn't just one general thing, but rather it's a bunch of different intelligences, each representing a different way we think and interact with the world.
Yeah.
He actually suggested 8, maybe even 9 distinct intelligences.
Okay.
And then he took this framework and applied it to how we understand leadership, especially focusing on what makes leaders creative and effective.
So instead of just looking at leadership in general, he's applying this idea of multiple intelligences.
Right.
Interesting. So remind me, what are some of those different intelligences?
Okay, so you've got linguistic intelligence, which is all about language.
Right.
Gardner used T.S. Eliot as an example of a creative leader in this domain.
Okay.
Then you have logical mathematical intelligence. This is about problem solving and abstract thinking, like Einstein.
Okay.
Then you have bodily kinesthetic intelligence, which is about physical skill and coordination.
Okay.
He used Martha Graham, the dancer, as an example there.
Okay.
Then you have spatial intelligence, understanding and manipulating visual information, like Picasso.
Okay.
Then there's musical intelligence, Stravinsky. Interpersonal intelligence, which is about understanding and working well with other people. He used Gandhi as an example there. Intrapersonal intelligence, all about self-awareness and understanding your own emotions. He used Freud for that one.
Yeah.
And then you have naturalist intelligence, recognizing patterns in nature, like Darwin. And then he even suggested this possible 9th intelligence called existential intelligence.
Wow, that's a way broader definition of smart than I think we usually use.
It is, yeah.
So you're saying that a leader's strength could be in any of these areas,
Right.
depending on what their field is.
Exactly.
So like a great orchestra conductor might use mostly musical and interpersonal intelligence.
That's a great example, yeah.
Okay, so what did Gardner have to say about how these intelligences actually play out in leadership?
Well, he argued that effective leaders often use their strengths in one or more of these areas to connect with and influence the people they lead.
Okay.
But he also pointed out some interesting paradoxes that come with leadership.
Okay, like what?
Well, for example, he talked about how you need deep knowledge in your field, like you have to be an expert,
Right.
but you also have to be able to communicate effectively with people who don't have that expertise.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And he also talked about the challenge of coming up with a vision or a story that works for a diverse group of people without accidentally dividing the community.
Okay, yeah. I can see how that would be really tricky.
Yeah, especially in a complex environment like education.
Right.
Where you have teachers and students and parents and administrators all coming from different places and with different priorities.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So did Gardner talk about any specific qualities that make a leader effective?
He did, yeah. He described what he called the effective leader, or EL.
Okay.
And he observed a few common things about them.
Like what?
Well, he said they often have a very strong sense of their own abilities.
Okay.
And they can sometimes come across as a bit abrasive.
Okay.
And he even noticed that a lot of them had lost a father figure early in life.
Interesting.
He also talked about how they're open to all kinds of different experiences.
Okay.
And how they're really good at understanding their audience. And he emphasized that respect for them isn't just given. It's something they have to earn through their actions and communication.
Okay, so it sounds like he's painting a pretty complex picture here.
He is, yeah.
Going beyond just skills and knowledge.
Yeah.
And looking at their experiences and how they see themselves.
Right. He's bringing in those personal elements.
Which I think leads us perfectly into the WICS model itself.
Right.
Which, like you said, is trying to bring together a lot of these ideas that we've been talking about.
Yeah, it's a synthesis.
Okay, so let's dive into the WICS model. What's the main idea behind it?
Yeah, let's get to the heart of the matter here.
So Sternberg is proposing WICS, which is wisdom, intelligence, and creativity, all synthesized together.
Okay.
as a really important way to understand what makes a good, positive educational leader.
Mm-hmm.
And he's saying that a lot of those earlier series we talked about, they kind of touched on these things, but indirectly.
Okay.
WICS is different because it brings them all together in a deliberate and really clear way. And according to Sternberg, it's the combination of all three of these working together that really sets apart a truly great educational leader.
Okay, so it's not enough to just be super smart or really creative or even really wise on your own?
Right. You might be a decent leader with one or two of those.
Okay.
But to really be amazing and make a lasting impact, you need all three working together.
Got it. So how do they all work together?
Well, he sees creativity as the engine that generates those new ideas and ways of looking at problems.
Okay.
Then analytical intelligence comes in, and it evaluates those ideas.
Okay.
It figures out, okay, how good are these ideas
Yeah.
and what might happen if we use them.
Okay.
And then practical intelligence is what lets the leader actually put those ideas into action
Okay.
and convince others that they're worth doing.
Okay.
And then finally, you have wisdom. And this is like the moral compass.
Yeah.
It makes sure that all of these actions are ultimately doing good for the whole community.
Okay, so it sounds like a very complete framework, covering everything from coming up with new solutions to putting those solutions into practice
Right.
and doing it all in an ethical way.
Exactly.
So to break it down a little further, how does he approach talking about these three components?
Well, he starts with intelligence because he sees that as the foundation for both creativity and wisdom.
Okay.
Then he talks about creativity because he
Yeah.
says you need that to develop wisdom.
Okay.
And then finally, he gets to wisdom, building on those concepts of intelligence and creativity.
So it's like laying a strong base and then adding those other elements on top.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's start with intelligence then. How does Sternberg actually define that, especially in the context of leadership?
So his definition of intelligence is actually pretty detailed, and it's based on his own theory of successful intelligence.
Okay.
Basically, he says that intelligence is your ability to reach your goals in life. But it's not just about any goals.
Okay.
It has to be within the context of your culture and society.
Okay. So why is that part about culture so important?
Well, it matters because what counts as a goal in the first place?
Mm-hmm.
And the ways that people think are okay for reaching those goals.
Yeah.
Those things can be totally different in different cultures.
Okay, that makes sense.
Like what's seen as success in one place might be seen completely differently somewhere else.
Yeah.
He also says that it's not enough to just have goals.
Mm-hmm.
You have to figure out which goals are really meaningful, how they all fit together, and then how to actually make progress towards them.
So you need to know what you want to achieve
Right.
and have a plan for how to get there.
Exactly.
Okay, and then he talks about using your strengths and compensating for your weaknesses.
Yeah.
That seems kind of obvious, but how does that fit into his definition of intelligence?
Well, it comes down to this basic idea. No one is good at everything, right?
Right.
So people who are successful, and that includes successful leaders,
Yeah.
they know what they're good at,
Yeah.
and they figure out how to use those strengths. They also come up with strategies for getting better in the areas where they're weaker,
Right.
or finding ways to work around those weaknesses.
So you're saying self-awareness is really important.
It's huge. You need to know what you bring to the table and where you might need help from others.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then there's this really interesting idea about how we interact with our environment.
Okay.
He talks about adapting to shaping and selecting environments.
Okay.
A lot of the traditional ideas about intelligence are all about how well you can adapt.
Mm-hmm.
But Sternberg says that successful intelligence also means actively trying to change your environment
Okay.
so it works better for you.
Okay.
And sometimes it even means choosing a whole new environment if the one you're in isn't working.
Okay.
He uses the example of Herbert Simon, who won a Nobel Prize.
Mm.
Simon had successful careers in a bunch of different fields.
Really?
Yeah. So Sternberg thinks that shows he's good at picking environments that worked for him.
Interesting. So intelligence isn't just about fitting in. It's also about being proactive and making changes or finding a better fit.
Exactly. It's a much more dynamic way of thinking about intelligence.
Okay, so it's not just about how smart you are in a traditional sense.
Right. And he also says that successful intelligence is more than just those things that are on a standard IQ test.
Right, the memory and analytical skills.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
He's also talking about your ability to come up with new ideas and use what you know in practical ways.
So creative and practical intelligence, too.
Exactly, which we'll get to in a minute.
Okay.
But he even goes deeper than that.
Okay.
He talks about how we actually think.
Oh, so like the process is involved in being intelligent.
Right. He talks about something called componential analysis, which is basically looking at all the individual steps you take in your mind when you're trying to solve a problem.
So like understanding the information.
Right. Making connections, applying what you know,
Yeah.
all of that. And he also talks about meta components. Think of these as like the control center in your brain.
Okay.
They're the processes you use to plan, keep track of how you're doing, and evaluate whether you're on the right track.
So they're like the brain's leadership team.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. So if intelligence is all of these things, how does he think we should measure it?
Well, he says that we can't just rely on those typical analytical tests.
Yeah.
We have to assess creative and practical abilities as well.